Welcome to DreamMachine. My name is Arun.
My name is Patricia.
My goodness, has this one been long overdue?
I know. We've been so busy with so many things that we haven't had the chance to actually sit down and do this podcast, which now we finally get the chance to do it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So this episode is about Dogman.
Yes.
And based off the popular book series and also made by DreamWorks. And this is actually a spin-off of Captain Underpants, the first movie.
Yes,
so
it is.
You all imagine like, oh, joy.
Yeah, so many years ago, we talked about Captain Underpants, the first epic movie on DreamMachine, and
Which I couldn't get through.
Yeah, you couldn't get through the first time that you watched it. You were in an airplane coming to visit me for the holidays, and you were watching multiple movies. You watched Barbie, you watched Spider-Man Homecoming, and then you watched this movie as your third movie, and by the 30-minute mark, you were like done. And then
what happened was that I tried to watch it the first time before I got on the plane, and I was like, I got to the 30-minute mark, and I just couldn't go any further after that. And then I watched it the second time, so it was kind of like, yeah, it took me 2 attempts in order to watch Captain Underpants, the first movie. Now, for everybody who loves Captain Underpants, the first movie, and Weird Al Yankovic and everything else that goes in that, I love Weird Al Yankovic as well. And but it's just I never grew up with Captain Underpants. So therefore, when I looked at it, it just kind of felt like, nah, this just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah, I think it's for people who grew up with the original Captain Underpants books in the 90s that really gravitated towards it. Or if people who did not read the original books when they were younger, they saw it as like a very fun and very wacky and hyperactive movie that was sadly overlooked. I mean, this came out during one of DreamWorks' lowest points around the early 2010s, in which a lot of their films were not very financially successful. We talked about this with, several of the other films like this, and also with Peabody and Sherman and Rise of the Guardians, where those were critically acclaimed films, but they were financial failures. And that was when you have the likes of various people being fired from the studio, and even Jeffrey Katzenberg himself left to create QB. Yeah, and that was when the whole merger with NBC Universal happened. And so, that was at a point in which DreamWorks was not going very well. And so it took them like over 8 to 9 years until eventually we got that dip in the well again in theatrical form with Dogman. Now, I know a lot of people are asking about like, oh, have you seen the Captain Underpants animated series on Netflix?
No.
No, we have not.
Well, there's also another animated series we're supposed to be getting through, but we so far, failed to try and get through that fully at the moment.
We'll get to it eventually.
It just feels kind of like there's like tons, and really every DreamWorks movie seems to have its own animated TV show at this point. So like, I'm sure there's a lot of people saying, when are you going to watch this series? When are you going to watch that series? It's like we are massively busy with that. And by the way, you are going to have to pay me to watch the Boss Baby animated TV series. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like there's certain things that I will do for DreamWorks, and there's certain things I will not.
Yeah. And so the Captain Underpants animated series is actually pretty relevant to our discussion, because the person who was the showrunner and executive producer of it was Peter Hastings, who you may know as he was a writer and executive producer for Pinky and the Brain, and he went off and he worked on various Disney Channel shows, and then eventually he became the producer for the animated series, and then eventually he became the director of this film. So yeah, I think that that's a great way for us to segue into our conversation.
I feel good. Super fly, super good, shoulda, coulda, knew I would. Super fly, super fresh, ask your mama, she's impressed. Super fly, super cold, super mean, super nice, super clean. Yeah, you know what? So good. Yeah, well, always so good, so good, baby.
Here's the thing about this. Now, as much as I give Captain Underpants a lot of grief, and most of it I would say is unwarranted for obviously the reasons that we stated in the last couple of minutes, Dogman's a different scenario for me. It's obviously we've got this whole layout that there's this villainous orange cat called Petey, and he's terrorizing the city, and then it's up to Officer Knight and his dog Greg in order to basically save the day and try and take PD to task. So if anything, we kind of got like, it's not exactly like a Megamind situation, if you will. Like, it's just like we're introduced to our villain first, and then we're introduced to our heroes, which I think is actually, I think is actually a good way to start this off. I think because one thing that took me very, very surprised. By the way, we are going to go into spoilers as we always do into this. PD kind of took me by surprise because I just thought, oh hey, we're going to get generic villain, and then it's kind of like, oh wow, they've actually put some layers of like character building into all of this. This is what I feel Dogman segues massively away from Captain Underpants, whereas in Captain Underpants, it just kind of felt like, a lot of silliness, where in actual fact, with Petey and with Dogman and with all our other characters, it looks like some actual good research and some actual good, character building and world building has actually got into this. Where I think this kind of feels a bit like a kind of like a passion project in a way. Watching this.
Yeah, and I know for some of the fans who have read the original Dogman books, they basically like truncated several of the books into this one movie, which makes a lot of sense considering that there are over over 10 Dogman books alone, and there are several like Captain Underpants books. There's even like a lot of spin-off series, even with the characters that we've seen in Dogman. Like there's already a spin-off series of Petey and Little Petey, and there's a lot of other things. So yeah, I mean, I understand that for Captain Underpants and even Dogman fans is like, oh well, I mean, we weren't supposed to get like this development of the characters this earlier on. It's supposed to be more sillier, and then it gets into the deeper stuff later. But because it's a movie, and because this will be probably a lot of people's first time watching Dogman, I mean, especially in the UK, which I don't think Captain Underpants and Dogman is huge over here.
It could be.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, like, I got to be honest with you, like, this movie took me by surprise because when the whole, again, I'm sorry to keep going on about Captain Underpants, but I mean, I'll try and get away from this now. Dogman as its own entity, I think, I feel like they've actually got something here, that they can actually build upon, and so obviously they've built off like the first story, of Dogman, of establishing our characters, introducing us to some villains, introducing us to all the side characters and everything. And I feel like with what they've got, again, like with the bad guys, I feel like they could potentially have another Madagascar on their hands. They could have like a series of movies that could do very well and have got some very good stories behind them.
Yeah, and especially since there are a lot of books in both Dogman and its spin-off series focusing on Petey and Little Petey. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, this was a smart thing to do. Looking at this, I mean, like you look at the trailer and it's kind of like, oh yeah, like probably anyone under the age of 12 is probably going to get some enjoyment out of this. But no, like some of the stuff that they did in this was very intelligent. Like after the bomb goes off and then Officer Knight and Greg are obviously injured and they're in the hospital. They get the intelligent thing to do in the hospital is say, well, why don't we just put the dog's head on the man's body and then we create Dogman, and somehow his hands also seems to grow fur at the same time as well, because why not? But the one thing I really like about this is that Officer Knight, before all this happened to him, he had a life. He had a girlfriend he was going steady with, and they were in together, and then Greg was also part of that family cohesion as well. But then they said that the amount of time that's passed for Dogman to basically become its thing. Like, she's moved on, to another guy who has, another dog. And if anything, they try to do like a bit of a RoboCop situation with this, which I think was really smart.
And also a Spawn situation in which, you have, the person who passed away and eventually became Spawn, and his main wish was to be back with his wife. And then 5 years had passed, and his wife had already married somebody else, and they have a daughter. So, it's very similar to that as well, in which you have like a RoboCop or Spawn situation in which that, the guy had a regular life and he was happy with his family, and then disaster happened and he's turned into something else, and then he tries to go back to the way things were, but they're completely gone now.
Yeah, like the one thing that I think is one thing I would like to have seen them kind of play a bit more into is that the relationship between Officer Knight and Greg, and then becoming Dogman, because I would have thought that maybe in some kind of weird way, like that both of them would still be in there somewhere, I guess, and they still are, which I think I wish they played into that a little bit more. Like they had like the kind of like ongoing conversation inside their mind about regulating what they think is relevant, to what's going on in their situation compared to what is not, and they come to kind of some sort of conclusion. But I mean, to be honest, I mean that it doesn't really focus on that story. It focuses more on Petey. It focuses more like on other villains and also Little Petey as well, and so that's kind of where the story kind of goes, and it also focuses like on the people like within the city as well. And also you get the one thing I don't know if I'm really getting kind of tied to this kind of like whole thing, like you get the whole like news reporter like doing the whole narration of like what's happening in the movie, kind of like to kind of keep you up to speed. But after seeing it in Wallace and Gromit: Avengers the Most Foul, and seeing it in various like other movies that kind of go
the bad guys,
as well. It's in Cloudy Chance with Meatballs. It's in, like, you see it all the time now in these movies, and I get kind of a bit tired of it, really. Like, let the story tell itself.
Well, I think that what's clever here is that they actually make a whole bunch of jokes about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it still kind of feels kind of a bit Powerpuff Girls in a way. Like, they're just kind of making fun of the trope.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that they do focus on Dogman in the first act where, he's Officer Knight and his dog Greg, and then when they get spliced together, he gets to see that, his home is no longer his home and his girlfriend had left with somebody else, and then he becomes really sad.
He literally had to move into a doghouse.
Yes, he literally had to move into a doghouse.
In the city park.
Yes. And so, yeah, that's literally the only development that we get to see of Dogman at that point, because the rest of the focus of development comes from Petey. So I don't know how I feel about that, because the movie's called Dogman after all.
Well, I mean, the villains have always been the most interesting characters. I mean, like, if anything, Dogman is just there to save the day. And, I mean, obviously he has his own complexities, which we kind of outlined in the last, in the last couple of moments. But, Petey in himself is an interesting character because he comes effectively from a broken household. And, he didn't really want to basically be a villain. He's just kind of, like, become this thing because that's his interpretation of how awful the world is.
Yeah.
And everything. So, if anything, it's Little Petey who, like, and his interactions with, his later interactions with his father, which, kind of like help him resolve his conflict, if you will. So, Petey, to be fair, I mean, is the most interesting character, and the villains, I think, deserve their place in the movies because they're the ones who are actually the driving force of being the antagonist. So, no, I totally agree with the Petey story building and all this time they got in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now it's interesting because, Petey in the beginning of the movie, he's like this super evil cat who wants to be able to take over the city and destroy everything and
he's
stuff
Skeletor. Like he's, he's Dark Terror, and for those of you Centurion fans who can't remember who he is. He's effectively like, your Saturday morning cartoon villain, effectively. But this is the great thing about this is they actually, add layers to him, which I would have thought that, for something like this, you thought they'd never do this. You thought they're like, oh, let's just focus on Dogman. Let's let him do some silly stuff in in montages and everything like that. Let's throw in some action, and that's Dogman. That's exactly what I thought this was going to be. This actually, went way beyond my expectations.
Yeah. So Petey essentially is our villain of this movie, and he even has this little associate who he constantly fires and is pushing around, and she's like, "You owe me money," and Petey just gives her a whole bunch of things that is not money, and so she comes back and forth every once in a while. She's also like his social media person or something like that. And then he decides, you know what, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to get a clone machine. And then what he doesn't realize is that the clone machine only is able to produce the clone, and in the next 18 years is able to produce the perfect clone that he's looking for. And so
I shall call him Mini-Me.
Yes, and so here comes Little Petey, who he thinks is his papa, but is not. It's actually his clone. And
I wonder if that's also a callback to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the Secret of the Ooze.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I think that Little Petey is adorable. The fact that he's just like drawing pictures of him and his papa, and the fact that he wants to be able to make his papa happy after, he's being told that, the world is bad, and, the only way you can be able to survive is just to, ration everybody that's on your way and stuff like that. And so, Little Petey tries to help him out, and it's actually kind of surprising in one scene in which he actually found his grandfather who left Petey when he was a little kitten, and brought him back, and then you think, oh, maybe this is going to be like a very sweet moment in which maybe the grandfather will apologize, saying like, I wasn't ready to raise a kitten, and I had to leave, or maybe your mother.
I love how Little Petey's just so innocent in all of this. He is the total opposite. Like he's like the very beginning of life, and Petey's just like at the very end of it. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you introduce the grandfather character, and it's the one thing that I found interesting is that's it. Now you've got like two kind of like weights that I like in here, like Little Petey who is very optimistic and it doesn't even care in the world, and then you got the grandfather who's basically just this curmudgeon who wants to just take advantage of everybody that he can see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the grandfather's played by Stephen Root, if you can believe it. Yeah, Bill Dotrey from King of the Hill, and the mayor from Amphibia, and the villain of a particular TV series that we'll be talking about eventually. But stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But I completely forgot about this. That even though that Petey Petey is the main villain. There's also another villain that's mixed into this, and that is Flippy the fish, who's voiced by Ricky Gervais.
So basically a villain played by a villain.
Yes. So Flippy was apparently like this really evil fish, but he died a long time ago, and he has been under the police officer's drawer this entire time. And so Petey decides, I'm going to capture him, and I'm going to have him help me destroy the city and take it over and all that kind of stuff. And, he was going to take him over to like this living building where it makes things live. And eventually it gets caught up inside of the not livable...
After have you explained all that to me, it's like it's amazing how I just kind of like just smile and nod and just go along with that. Like a living building.
Yes.
Like it's just a evil fish that's dead that lives that's been basically in the captain's desk this entire time. All right.
I mean, to be quite honest, it's not too surprising because Dogman is based off of the stories that were written by George and Harold from Captain Underpants.
Exactly, yeah. So this is the spin-off of Captain Underpants, which made me a bit nervous to begin with. But no, this is, dare I say, I'm probably going to annoy a lot of people in the comment section, but I think this is actually better than Captain Underpants.
Well, fair enough. I like them for two different reasons. I like Captain Underpants because it's able to become, silly and happy and wacky. And I do like Dogman because it's funny, but at the same time, it can be really heartwarming and it can touch into your heartstrings at times.
I think its strength in Dogman, I think it's its characters. Look at who we have. We have Dogman, who's going through their own struggles, despite all the comedic things that are going on. Where you've got a love relationship going on between the captain and the reporter, and then you've got Petey, and you got Little Petey, and also the grandfather Petey also being mixed up in all of this and everything, and they have their own interactions, and so I think the way that they put this all together, the comedic aspects and just the silliness is obviously all mixed into there. Obviously that's but the fact is it doesn't become distracting. That's the important thing I think about this about Dogman. Some of the stupid stuff that were happening in this movie, I actually can't remember all that much. I actually remember the character interactions far more than all the silly stuff that was going on in the movie.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a problem because Dogman is a comedy. It's supposed to make people laugh. It's supposed to be silly, but
it does. But but I think the one thing I think about Dogman, I think, is that it's far more intelligent than I gave it credit for. Maybe it's just me going into this movie thinking that oh good grief, this is going to be Captain Underpants all over again, but it's not.
No, it's not.
It definitely isn't. And I feel like a lot more thought and heart went into, writing this story, I think, than what they did first with Captain Underpants. And that's my takeaway from it. I've got to be honest with you. I still go back to what I said before. I would rather watch Dogman than watch Captain Underpants in this. And that's quite shocking to say.
Give a shout out to Peter Hastings, who wrote and directed this movie. His experiences with working on the Captain Underpants animated series was able to transition him really well to do Dogman.
I think he understood what the flaws I think were of Captain Underpants. I think he did that very well to avoid them, and he's put together, I think, all right, it's not a perfect project, there's problems with it,
yes,
but I think that Dogman, I think, was far better than I was expecting it to be, far better than I thought it was going to be. It could have easily just been here's this silly side story of that was written by the characters of Captain Underpants, and we're not going to take it too seriously because it's like the subdomain of what actually is the main product. So, but no, they actually took some really good care and attention to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you could say that it's one of the spin-off series that some people argue that is just as good as the original source material, if not better. It's kind of like a Xena Warrior Princess Hercules, The Legendary Journey situation, or a Pinky and the Brain or Animaniacs kind of thing.
Yeah, well, Pinky and the Brain, obviously, they were mainstays of Animaniacs, and so it was no surprise that they were going to get their own show, and they got their own great adventures out of that. And so is Dogman is this a Pinky in the Brain situation with Dogman? Not really, because Dogman wasn't part of Captain Underpants in that way. It was more just a story that was written.
Yes.
But in regards to what they did here, what they've done with Dogman, I think, has been brilliant, and I think I would look forward to if they did any more stories, or dare I say, if Captain Underpants did any more, comic books out of that also be coming into spin-offs. I'm interested to see what Peter Hastings could potentially do with that too, if he gives them the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, again, this took us by surprise of how they were able to delve really deep into the characters, like with Dogman himself and with Petey and with Lil Petey. I mean, obviously, Flippy the fish. I mean, even though he's like he's actually, he doesn't become the main villain until the climax of the series, where finally he gets stuck into the mechanics of the live machine, and then he gets into life, and then he turns the live machine alive to attack the city and a whole bunch of other machines, including the club, which is a rave building.
Yeah.
And then, eventually it just attacks the city, and then you have...
I love how it looks like it's been written by a child, and
it
yet it still feels kind of plausible at the same time.
I mean, technically, in the universe, it was written by 2 children, so yes.
Yeah, like this sort of kind of reminds me, I think we talked about this to death about Dexter's Laboratory, but you remember like the episode that was written by a child and that was put on a tape and then railed over to them, and they decided just to make it into an episode.
Yes.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of that, but
Yeah.
a movie, and it ended up being kind of like one of the more recognizable episodes of Dexter's Laboratory, which is quite hilarious to think about. So, yeah, I just think that I mean, it feels kind of weird because I feel like there's not much to write home about in regards to Dogman being this project, but at the same time, I feel like if you look at characters, even if you look at the music was actually really cool. Like going through it all, and all of it, I think there wasn't like an inappropriate music track. I think in all of this, when it needed to be sentimental, it did it very well. Like. I love the track that they played when Dogman finally returns home, and then he's like flashing back to like all the memories that he had in the house, and all that was going on, and then he has the sad, duty of having to build his own doghouse in the city park, and then have to settle in there. But then he finds a new home in that, and so obviously the music that plays in all of that, I think, is also very good.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Tom Ho, who was able to produce the music, and he's worked on several movies, a lot of Aardman films, such as Shaun the Sheep, Farmageddon, Early Man. He even did TV shows such as The Great British Bake Off and Ted Lasso. So, yeah, I mean, he was able to do a pretty good job with the music.
Well, as we say about Early Man, the better. But I think, but in regards to this project, I think he got this correct. And because it's so easy to kind of like, this is just Dogman, so let's just make it sound really silly. But no, they didn't. And I mean, that's what the thing that we keep coming back to is that this should be silly, this should be nuts, this should be comedy, this should be that. But no, there's far more into this than actually meets the eye. Mm-hmm. And I think if people actually give Dogman a chance, they actually might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. So the movie had a $40 million budget, and it made back $127.9 million.
Yeah, I think, in this day and age, I mean, the success rate seems to be kind of like between like 300 to 500 million, I think, in regards to this. So it'd be interesting to see what the debate is in this situation. Okay, it's made like, nearly 3 times its budget back. I mean, is that success or is that failure in their eyes? So, yeah, well, I mean, it depends how much money they actually put into, promoting the film, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of, in a way, it's sort of kind of disappointing. I guess some people kind of like just decided that, because how much did Captain Underpants actually make? If we remember.
I'm trying to remember because, like I said earlier in the podcast, Captain Underpants was not a major success in the box office. Here it is, $38 million, and it made back 125.
So this, mind you, Dogman seems to do slightly better than Captain Underpants.
Only by $2 million.
Yeah, like I thought maybe one excuse I would have given is if I remember what the box office number was, is that maybe people were like, because they know he's like, from the makers of Captain Underpants, I think that might have been a turn-off thing for people. Maybe they decided, hey, these are the same people who made Shrek. These are the people who made all the other DreamWorks movies. Maybe How to Train Your Dragon. Maybe they could have clawed some people back from doing that. Mm-hmm. Maybe, rather than saying like, hey, this is related to Captain Underpants. Because I've got to be honest with everybody, like this, I feel is better than Captain Underpants. In many ways, and I feel it's far emotionally charged than Captain Underpants, and far more, aesthetically pleasing, dare I say, than Captain Underpants was. I mean, like, at least with Dogman, at least the animation style, like the way that they did all this, was linear all the way through. Captain Underpants was a crazy, fever dream, if anything. So, I'm very surprised that. you know, I get the feeling the fact that it's tied to Captain Underpants is the reason why it didn't do so well. I think if they like tried to make it its own thing and trying to move it away from Captain Underpants, I think it probably would have done a lot better, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the only reason why people would even know that it is from Captain Underpants is because they would have read the original Dogman comics. I mean, there's no mention of the Captain Underpants comic characters at all.
Well, the two kids make a cameo in the.
Yes, they make a cameo, but it's not mentioned in the trailers. It's not mentioned in any of the promotional stuff.
I think it was mentioned in the trailers, actually.
Oh, it was?
I think it was. At least in some of the adverts that I saw, like when it was. By the way, this was advertised to death on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, it was.
It was, and so, but the one thing he kept saying was like, from the makers of Captain Underpants, which is kind of like, you know, like. Promote the other DreamWorks movies, actually. I think you're probably better off doing that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, for this being the first animated film that was the post, DreamWorks shutdown with the Burbank studio and, you know, being outsourced by Scholastic Entertainment, you know, it's actually a pretty good deal. I mean, they were able to keep the same art style that was featured in the original books, and you know they were able to improve a lot of the stuff that was featured in the original Captain Underpants movie from over a decade ago.
Oh yeah, I could probably imagine like when people go to see Dogman, they want to go see what they're familiar with, and so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest they would have kept the art aesthetic and tried to make it as much as true to the book as possible.
Yeah,
and so I think at least in the art style anyway. I mean, in regards to the story, in regards to the way they tell the story, that's another story in itself.
Yeah,
but I mean. I guarantee you're gonna. I would probably say pick up the Dogman book. I think still because I guarantee I think they probably will get more, character developments and the book's always more involved than the movie's always been.
Yeah, of course, especially since there's like a lot of books. There's and they're still releasing more books of it.
Well, there will be, yeah, because they want to write on the movie, being. Remember, like when they did a re-release when the movie first came out, and that's one thing that seems to see that every time DreamWorks seems to pick up a book series, there's always a re-release with the new art style.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, that's true because the art style always changes and evolves as the creator continues to learn and improve his style. So whenever that you see that happening, then, some people will be like, oh, but I like the art style from the old days. It's like, yeah, but unfortunately, it's not going to be the same because, the artist himself or herself or themselves were able to grow and improve and, finalize their art style to what it is now. I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying about like Invader Zim Enter the Florpus. Why does it look so weird? Well, Jonan Vasquez has taken over a decade to improve his art style. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm glad that they were able to keep the art style pretty consistent with this movie. I mean, especially, going in from Captain Underpants to Dogman. But yeah, there are some noticeable improvements and a lot of great details that weren't in the original Underpants movie.
Okay, now I'm about to disappoint everybody, and compare this to the bad guys. I got to be honest with you. I prefer the bad guys.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, like the bad guys. I feel like they did a better job of mixing the comedic and the serious moments. I think than Dogman. I think did.
It had a much better balance because all the characters had their own series of events that they had to go through. Mr. Wolf, Mr. Snake. Miss Tarantula, Mr. Piranha, Mr. Shark, they all had their moments in which they had to overcome the fact that they were bad guys and now they had to be trained with not being bad guys. The villain is actually better too because he's actually a twist villain that was able to take you by surprise. And the comedy...
He wasn't a villain that, wasn't just like, oh, hey, I'm evil at the very beginning and then I'm going to get substituted by a fish, later on in the movie. Like, it's just, that's the one thing I feel the bad guys it definitely has, several times over Dogman knows.
And also, the comedy is way better.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we remember both the comedy and...
Even the stupid comedy was funny when they were saying, hey, that asteroid looks like a butt. Like, it's just like, it's not a butt, it's a heart. It's like, no, it looks like a butt.
Yes.
Like, yeah, even the stupid stuff was more hilarious than Dogman was.
Yeah, and...
Not knocking Dogman, by the way.
Yeah, and speaking of the bad guys, before we saw Dogman, we got the trailer for the bad guys, too.
Oh, yeah, and... I think it's funny because, a lot of the comedic movies that they showed in that, I feel like, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, hey, this is what you're going to be, after you've... I thought it was going to be a case of, after you've washed Dogman out of your mouth, you'll be able to at least, wash it out with some of these other, better movies. But no, it's kind of like, I feel like, Dogman is now up there. Okay, it's not on the par with Bad Guys. It's not on par with Puss in Boots and some of the other recent DreamWorks movies that have come out. But I have to say, it's a lot better than Abominable, and it's a lot better, hell of a lot better than Home. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot better than some of the more recent DreamWorks films that we've gotten over the past decade, like Abominable or the Croods to a New Age.
Yeah,
or,
it's definitely better than the Croods.
Yeah, or Spirit Riding Free or Boss Baby Family Business.
I think Dogman. I would, if they said, okay, we're gonna make several Dogman movies and we're gonna basically just destroy the Boss Baby franchise. I would agree with DreamWorks to do that 1000%.
I would even say, you know what? If you want to destroy the Trolls franchise, I would be all happy for it.
Well, unfortunately, there's an audience for that, so I don't think they're going to do it.
Nah.
Yeah. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Trolls movie unfortunately made more money than the. It did. Yeah. We're stuck with Trolls movies for the foreseeable future, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
we're kind of moving away from Dogman a little bit. Shall we score this? And
we didn't score Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, the first time because we didn't include scores at the time. So
yeah, shall we just do it? And,
all right.
Okay. I'll be honest with everybody. So this Dogman took me massively by surprise, as you probably heard throughout the rest of this podcast. And I think the animation style is great. The characters are really good as well. The comedy, it kind of gets a little bit out of kilter. We compare it to all the serious moments in the movie, but the serious movie I think is very well researched. I think some of the RoboCop, some of the other stuff that they kind of brought into the references into that, I think was very good, and because I like RoboCop, so I think this tried to do its best. I think to not okay, we're going to appeal to everybody as much as we possibly can. I think they said, okay, well, let's give a little bit to some people, give a little bit to other people, and but we're not going to throw it in their faces, but we are going to make subtle references to other movie franchises that we do. But this, I feel is not it's not stealing stuff from other movies. It's just researching other movie emotional moments and other aesthetics, and then putting it into Dogman, which I think has worked out. It could have easily been a disaster if they did it all wrong, but they did it correctly in this. And so I got to say, with everything that I've just said right now, 8.5 out of 10.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna probably say 8 because, again, it did take me by surprise on what we were able to see, where it was able to mix the silliness with the heart. But I think that I'm gonna give it a bit points, like a half a point down from your score because I felt that they could have worked on the comedy a little bit better, and I felt that maybe Dogman should have gotten a little bit more development as a character. We got a lot of development with Petey, and he's our villain, absolutely. That's important, but after the first act, Dogman doesn't really get a lot of development after that. He's just really happy and optimistic and willing to capture Petey and do his job.
I don't think that's where the story was, in my opinion.
But it's called Dogman.
I know it's called Dogman, but there's a lot of movies that are named after characters, but then you find out all the villains or all the other side characters get far more developments and maybe better off for it. I don't know, the movie, the Terminator's called the Terminator, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's character doesn't really get any development besides kill a robot, really. Maybe in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, obviously he does, because obviously he can, the Terminator can then learn for itself and everything like that. But in the original Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger was just basically just this fiendish antagonist that wanted to kill Sarah Connor. But if anything, our characters came out of Kyle and came out of Sarah and came out of various other people who can get involved in the Armageddon. So it's so that in itself, just because a movie's named after a character doesn't really mean it has to be all about him.
Fair enough.
Yeah, Dogman, I feel like I did this right, in my opinion. Maybe you and I will disagree on that, but I feel like also don't get me wrong. I think we did get some some more development with Dogman, because we're going through a character who's now got a dog on his head. as stupid as that sounds, and he's having to go through the emotional baggage over that, because his wife, his girlfriend is now, and the dog has left him and for another guy and a dog, and everyone doesn't need to be taking kind of the seriousness of that, and it's left to for the audience to kind of sympathize with Dogman in that situation.
Yeah,
But again, I think he got his moments.
Yeah, but again, that was after the first act. From the second act onward, he becomes really, really close with Lil Petey, becoming his best friend. And then afterwards, he starts really focusing on his job of capturing Petey so that he can be able to save the city and make the chief happy. And I guess even the chief even has his own moments where he has a crush on the news reporter, and he's trying to make his superior happy, even though that she says life's unfair. Call call this phone number.
Oh, you know what? We totally missed out on that mare character. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought she was going to be the twist villain. Didn't you think so? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that.
I thought it was gonna be like, oh hey, she's the one that's causing all the madness in this place. She's far too, out of the scope of like our main characters to be kind of like, I get it. I thought I was gonna say, I thought she was gonna be like, be the twist villain. I thought, oh god, they're doing Zootopia all over again. Like, so in a way, I sort of kind of glad they didn't do it, but I got the vibes that I feel like she was gonna end up being the twist villain at the end.
Yeah,
of
but
all of this.
she didn't. She was just like the grumpy, by the books superior who just wants the job done, and that's
exactly,
it.
yeah. So, it would have been interesting to see if they would have gone that route. But I would just kind of looked at it and thought, I saw this in Zootopia already.
Yeah.
Like,
But yeah, I mean, again, I do think that there were some things that they could have probably improved on, like a lot of the comedy. I mean, like more laugh out loud moments instead of just like stupid, like quick jokes that just like get a chuckle out of you and then you forget it like 2 seconds
you gotta
later.
keep in mind who's the audience demo with this. Is like, it's the bread and butter in this situation is 6 to 11. But the one thing I'm really glad that they did in this is that they gave the parents in the theater something to grasp onto.
Well, I mean, to be fair, when we went to see this movie in the theaters, we were the only ones who saw it.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, that was like after what the release was in January at
Yes.
this point. And what we saw it in February.
Yeah.
So I mean, like a lot of time had gone by that time. And look at the box office. I mean, like it probably got like some interest at the very beginning, and then it's kind of just tapered off after that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
to be fair, I'm trying to remember like what movies were out during that time that people were like, going over towards, because usually around January, February time, there's like nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but this the thing about this is that I feel like the way that they promoted this film. I mean, don't make me wrong. They went to they went to all the ends to do it, but I feel like because they didn't do enough to detach it away from Captain Underpants, and I know it's difficult because it's probably part of that world. I feel like that might have been the albatross that sort of like dragged some of the audience members out of the out of the situation. So yeah, that's just my take on it. I mean, I'm open to being wrong, but I just gotta feel that if they did a better job of like making it its own thing, and I think it probably would have had an easier ride. But I may be wrong about that. What do I know?
Yeah, so again, we want to give a major shout out to Peter Hastings, who was able to take a movie that was kind of a bit of a mixed bag for us at first, especially when we saw the trailers and we're like, okay, we're going back into the world of Captain Underpants, and I know you're not a big fan of it, but no, he was able to take it in strides. And
I would rather be told there's going to be 3 sequels to Dogman than be told there's going to be like another sequel to Boss Baby. To be honest with you. Like, I would rather be told. I'd rather be told that. Oh, there's gonna be. Oh, somehow they're gonna resurrect Will Smith's career and make Shark Tale 2.
oh, speaking of Will Smith, guess what he's going to be doing? He's going to be having his huge European tour around here.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, let's save that for Arun and Patricia, shall we?
Okay, let's do that.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning into Dream Machine, and take care, and bye bye for now.
See you later.